Has anyone ever told you that you're the absolute spitting image of that Mr. Bean? And I said, well, actually, I am the actor who plays Mr. Bean. And he said, I bet you wish you were.
The world seems to divide celebrities into two groups: those who spend millions of dollars crafting the perfect public image, and Rowan Atkinson, a man who has spent his entire career convincing everyone that he's incompetent, terrible at what he does, and completely unreliable. Yet the fascinating part is that his willingness to tear down his own image doesn't come from excessive confidence. Instead, it reflects a remarkably subtle principle of human psychology. There are countless ways to measure fame, but for a British star, reaching the peak of public attention can sometimes mean something as bizarre as being declared dead on the internet. When rumours of Rowan Atkinson's death spread across social media in 2021, news outlets had to rush in and set the record straight. But for a man whose career has been built on making fun of himself, the whole episode felt more like a gentle reminder that he was still very much alive. He just wasn't interested in wasting his time arguing with a fake Facebook page. The film industry has always rewarded actors who carefully build likable, respectable public personas. Rowan Atkinson, however, has always preferred a different path. When talking about Trevor Bingley, one of the rare genuinely kind characters he has portrayed, he openly admitted that his real personality is far better suited to playing difficult, disagreeable people, because in his view, nice people are usually, well, pretty boring. Most actors would proudly explain their effortless handling of on-screen props by talking about the months they spent training and mastering their craft. Rowan Atkinson took a very different approach. When discussing his performance as Detective May Gray, pipe in hand, he credited that convincing familiarity to a quiet little confession about his own lazy and old-fashioned student days. There's an unspoken rule in filmmaking: stay away from children and animals if you want to keep your sanity. Rowan Atkinson not only knew that rule, he willingly walked straight into it. But instead of blaming the circumstances or praising his own patience, he looked back on the experience with the self-awareness of someone who knew he had brought the trouble on himself. If a Hollywood producer created one of the most successful family entertainment franchises of all time, people would call it strategic brilliance. When Rowan Atkinson created timeless classics enjoyed by audiences of every generation, he stubbornly refused to accept any praise for clever planning. From his perspective, winning over children was simply an accidental side effect. Being called a national treasure is an honour that almost every British artist dreams of, a lasting recognition of everything they have contributed. Rowan Atkinson, however, saw that title as more of a sentence than a celebration. The thought of having to spend the rest of his life behaving perfectly and living up to the expectations that came with that prestigious label genuinely unsettled him.
That fills me with fear. More than anything else. There's something about being a national treasure that I've never really wanted to be. I mean, I'm going to take it as a flattering description, whomsoever might make it. But I think what comes with national treasuredom, I think, is kind of responsibility.
Becoming a role model for the next generation was never on Atkinson's list of career goals. While many celebrities try to inspire people through every speech they give, he has deliberately kept audiences from seeing him as someone to emulate. He knows exactly where his responsibilities end, and he has no interest in accepting a moral authority he never claimed to have.
You're supposed to fit in rather than stick out. And I wouldn't like that responsibility of being a sort of role model or something. I've never wanted to be a role model. I hope I'm not a misbehaving man particularly, but the idea of being, a sort of someone that people look up to, that fills me with more fear than anything else.
There are fictional characters who make audiences wish they could meet them in real life, but Rowan Atkinson's creations certainly don't fall into that category. When he was asked which of his famous characters he would trust with the keys to his house, his answer carried none of the usual sentimental charm. He knows his own characters so well that he wouldn't place his trust in any of them.
Yeah, he'd probably leave after a day and not tell you.
Yeah, I feel like he'd be really nosy as well. He'd be like looking through.
Yes, yeah. In the end, I wouldn't trust any of them. I can't, but then that's why we...
Mr. Bean may be a childhood icon for millions, a character who has brought innocent laughter to audiences around the world. But through the clear-eyed psychological lens of the man who created him, the picture looks very different. Atkinson strips this legendary character down with remarkably blunt language, peeling away every trace of the harmless charm that audiences have long projected onto him.
The more interesting, because he's such a weirdo, he's such a sort of an unpleasant, strange, quite nasty, self-centered child, trapped in a man's body. But at the same time, playing him.
Watching Mr. Bean bounce across the screen, it's easy to assume the actor behind him must have been having the time of his life. The reality was exactly the opposite. Behind those wonderfully awkward expressions was an intensely demanding process. Rowan Atkinson wasn't basking in the spotlight. He was patiently carrying the weight of the role.
Because it's basically down to me to make things, work. And that's not a responsibility which I particularly enjoy. It's one that I've, suffered in order to get the art onto the screen. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's pleasurable. It's sort of stressful. I mean, the one that I've probably enjoyed.
In the public imagination, international stars spend their lives enjoying glamorous trips and exploring the world. Rowan Atkinson has always admitted to a far less romantic reality. He simply doesn't like traveling very much. Most of the time, if he finds himself in another country, it's not because he's chasing new experiences. It's because a film promotion contract requires him to be there.
I'm not a great lover of travel. I tend to travel in order to promote movies, actually, or I've been to all sorts of places, Japan and Sweden and the US and most of the countries in Europe, Australia, etc., that you go to all sorts of places. But
with a career as celebrated as his, most people would expect Atkinson to look back proudly on the legacy he has built. But his mind works in an entirely different way, one defined by relentless skepticism and unusually high standards toward himself. When he looks at a glass, he notices the empty half, and when he looks at his remarkable career, he modestly sees only a handful of performances that truly lived up to his own expectations. Behind the extraordinary physical versatility of one of comedy's greatest performers lies a past that was anything but easy. Rowan Atkinson didn't turn to performing because he wanted admiration. He turned to it because he needed an escape. The shy little boy who struggled with a stammer transformed the stage into a kind of personal therapy, a place where he could briefly set aside his embarrassment and become someone entirely different. While many actors are drawn to roles that showcase intelligence, strength, or heroism, Atkinson has always had a fascination with incompetence. He is strangely captivated by characters who are utterly helpless in the face of everyday life. To him, there is nothing more entertaining than bringing to life someone who simply can't seem to do anything right. Rowan Atkinson's philosophy of comedy isn't built on sugarcoating life. It is rooted deep in its darker corners. He sees laughter as a mirror that reflects tragedy, where human failure and absurdity become raw material for art. By bringing life's small miseries into the open, he transforms them into comedy that carries surprising emotional weight. Audiences often blur the line between an actor and the role that made them famous, but Atkinson has always drawn that line with almost startling clarity. Not only does he refuse to take personal pride in Mr. Bean, he has openly admitted to finding aspects of his own creation rather off-putting. It's a level of detachment that feels almost peculiar, separating real life from fiction with remarkable precision.
I probably enjoyed playing Mr. Bean the most because he's a character who's furthest away from my own character. As a person, I don't like him at all. I think he's very odd and pretty weird and not very nice.
Comedy on screen demands tremendous energy from the performer, and the bicycle sequence in Mr. Bean's Holiday is a perfect example. But instead of spinning a story about heroic dedication to the craft, Atkinson tells it with exhausted honesty. He was simply an aging man who wasn't especially athletic, doing his best to survive one shot at a time.
I didn't overtake them with great ease. I had to put in a tremendous amount of effort, and once we'd done a couple of takes of that, I was absolutely dead because I'm not a cyclist, I'm not fit, I'm not an athlete. They cycled very slowly to make sure that I overtook them. Very, very hard. I remember thinking that I'd nearly killed myself with the exhaustion.
When audiences see him starring in a beloved historical comedy like Blackadder, it's easy to assume he must be a student of history himself. Rowan Atkinson dismantles that assumption almost instantly with one matter-of-fact reply. He has never hesitated to admit the gaps in his academic knowledge, even in the middle of an interview.
George III on the throne and the Prince Regent in charge, is that right? Sorry, history was never my strong point.
Watching a secret agent swing through dangerous action sequences may look effortlessly cool on the big screen, but behind the scenes, the story couldn't be more different. Atkinson has never hidden the truth about his own courage. He hated nearly every second of filming action stunts and was more than happy to hand them over to a stunt performer whenever he could.
I hated every single one of them. I must have done it 25 times, this swinging on a big rope. So I did some, and I didn't do others.
To protect Blackadder, the creative team had to find a way out from beneath the enormous shadow cast by Fawlty Towers. Even after Blackadder earned its place as a television classic, Atkinson continued to view its standing with striking realism. He calmly accepted that many people would always rank it second.
Whatever we did, and most things are. Indeed, the Blackadder, I'm sure, is unfavourably compared to Fawlty Towers even now. But anyway, we thought we'd reduce the chances of that by at least taking it completely out of the 20th century, which was the century we were in.
People often analyse Atkinson's silent comedy as though it were the product of some grand artistic vision. His own explanation is much simpler and far less academic. He says his signature style of facial expression developed for one very practical reason. He was simply too lazy to write dialogue.
And I'm not really a very diligent writer, so I thought I just stood in front of a mirror, to be honest, and I just started pulling faces, I mean, for want of a better term. And I just sort of, was doing this...
Atkinson's gift for self-deprecating humour reaches its peak in the way he judges himself the moment a performance is over. Right after recreating the famous facial expressions that made him a household name, he immediately critiqued the performance with absolutely no mercy.
Anyway, it was something like that. It was something like that.
Continuing to play a secret agent later in life would be a challenge for any actor. Instead of hiding the passage of time with technology or makeup, Atkinson made his own aging part of the character's evolution. He turned his age into the most natural punchline of all.
Blood, because I've got older, so we thought, why is this older man still a spy? Although, as you mentioned earlier, Roger Moore was a spy when he was 57.
To the public, Mr. Bean may be an endearing fool. Through Atkinson's own analytical lens, however, the character looks far less charming. He has openly pointed to Mr. Bean's selfishness, his almost anarchic behaviour, and his remarkable lack of personal appeal.
Because I think, Mr. Bean is a selfish, self-centred, anarchic child, really a very, he looks after number one and is quite charmless, sort of.
Johnny English always tries to project elegance and sophistication, but Atkinson sees right through the polished suit. In calm agreement with many critics, he describes his own character in terms that are anything but flattering: self-centered, arrogant, and fundamentally foolish.
Johnny English, the comedy spy character which I occasionally play, that he's vain and sort of, again, self-centered, doesn't care about anybody else.
He's a knob, really.
He's another knob, yeah.
Looking back on a career spanning decades and filled with iconic characters, most actors would probably sum it up with words like legacy or pride. Rowan Atkinson chose a far more memorable conclusion. He joked that every one of his characters belongs on the same list of people no one would willingly invite to dinner.
Contrast to actually this catalogue of just people that you wouldn't want to have dinner with.
In The Tall Guy, Atkinson plays a comedian who is obnoxious, vain, and hopelessly full of himself. The amusing part is that he never had to look very far for inspiration. He joked that the character was based on himself and that the safest way to play an awful person was simply to do it yourself.
Kind of tricky thing, because obviously one doesn't want to admit that it was in any sense biographical. But it was thought maybe that if I played the role, no one could possibly say, well, of course, that's really Rowan Atkinson. If someone else had played the role, then they would have said that. They would have said, you know who that is.
The wildly energetic dance sequence in Johnny English Strikes Again may have given audiences plenty of laughs, but for an actor well into his later years, it was a genuine physical ordeal. Looking back, Atkinson could only respond with his trademark sarcasm, directing the joke squarely at his own exhausted body.
I display some extreme
I think we've got some
dance moves.
There's some of your moves.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And it's very, and it was very taxing, yes, I have to say. And, you know, it doesn't get less taxing with the advancing years. But I managed to keep it going, and we just did a couple of takes in which I just sort of did the silliest stuff I could.
Yeah.
Many people imagine the set of a comedy film as a place overflowing with laughter and spontaneous jokes. Rowan Atkinson has happily shattered that myth by making himself the punchline. He is so serious and intensely focused while working that the production team could barely find a single moment when he laughed at an on-set mistake.
They very often try and get the sort of blooper tapes together of things like the Blackadder, and they're always looking for the moment when I corpse or when I laugh or when I make a mistake, and there are none. In all the series of the Blackadder, there are none of me being remotely amused by anything.
Ironically, a role can become so famous that it eventually turns against the actor who created it. Atkinson's story about shopping for car parts perfectly captures the strange rhythm of his lifelong self-deprecating humour. The harder he tried to convince people that he really was Rowan Atkinson, the more they saw him as some delusional man pretending to be Mr. Bean for attention.
And I could tell after a while I had to bring the conversation to a close because clearly not only was he not believing me, but he was getting quite annoyed that I was pursuing this line of I am Rowan Atkinson, and clearly he thought I was this total arse. Just because I happen to look a bit like Mr. Bean, goes around the country actually claiming to be Mr. Bean.
Ironically, a role can become so famous that it eventually turns against the very actor who brought it to life. Atkinson's story about shopping for car parts perfectly captures the strange logic that has defined his lifelong self-deprecating humour. The moment he tried to convince people that he really was himself, the world saw him as nothing more than some delusional fool pretending to be Mr. Bean in hopes of making a quick buck.